The lecture hall buzzed with the typical pre-class chatter of the Galactic Academy's most prestigious bounty hunting course. Students from across 17 different species filled the tiered seats, their various forms of communication creating a symphony of clicks, chirps, growls, and electronic beeps. At the front of the room, Professor Vexani, a towering Zalithian with 4 arms and crystalline skin, arranged his holographic displays with practiced efficiency. In the back row, tucked into the corner seat closest to the emergency exit, sat a figure that most students had learned to ignore. She was human, one of the newer species to join the Galactic Federation, and she never spoke. Not once, in the 3 months since term began, had anyone heard her voice. She simply sat there, day after day, taking notes on an old-fashioned paper tablet while everyone else used neural interfaces or quantum scribes. Her name was Sarah Chen, according to the class roster, but most students had taken to calling her the Mute, when they bothered to acknowledge her existence at all. She was average height for a human, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and clothes that seemed designed for function over fashion. Nothing about her appearance suggested she belonged in an elite bounty hunting program alongside genetically enhanced super predators and cyborg tracking specialists. "Today," Professor Vexani announced, his voice resonating through the hall's acoustic amplifiers, "we begin our final examination period. As you all know, this course culminates in a practical test where you will track and apprehend one of your fellow students in a controlled environment." Excited murmurs rippled through the classroom. This was what they'd all been training for, the chance to prove their worth as galactic bounty hunters. The Galactic Academy's bounty hunting certification was the most respected credential in the field, guaranteeing lucrative contracts and prestigious assignments across the known galaxy. "The rules are simple," Vexani continued, manipulating his holographic display to show a 3-dimensional map of the Academy's training facility. "One student will be designated as the target. They will have a 6-hour head start to hide anywhere within the 1,000-square-kilometer facility. The remaining students will work individually to track and apprehend the target. The first to succeed wins the practical exam. The target, if they evade capture for 72 hours, also passes." A massive hand shot up from the middle of the room. It belonged to Kroner, a Thracian whose species had evolved from apex predators on a world where everything tried to kill everything else. Standing nearly 3 meters tall with razor-sharp claws and enhanced sensory organs, he was widely considered the class favorite. "Professor," Kroner rumbled in his deep, intimidating voice, "who will be the target?" Vexani's crystalline features shifted into what passed for a smile among his species. "An excellent question, Kroner. The target has already been selected randomly." He paused for dramatic effect, his 4 eyes scanning the assembled students. "Sarah Chen." The silence that followed was so complete that you could have heard a pin drop in vacuum. Then, like a dam bursting, the room erupted in laughter. Even the normally stoic Quintar, silicon-based life forms known for their emotional restraint, seemed to vibrate with amusement. "The human!" wheezed Blazix, a plasma-based entity whose energy form flickered with what could only be described as glee. "The one who hasn't said a word all semester? This will be over in hours." "I feel bad for her," added Whisper in the Void, a phase shifter whose translucent form rippled with sympathetic patterns. "She seems nice enough, just not cut out for this line of work." Sarah Chen sat motionless in her corner seat, her expression unchanged. She continued taking notes as if the entire room hadn't just learned she would be their prey in 48 hours. Her pen moved steadily across the paper, capturing every detail of Professor Vexani's explanation of the examination protocols. The laughter eventually died down as Vexani raised one of his 4 hands for attention. "I trust you will all take this examination seriously, regardless of who the target is. Remember, Your prey will have access to the same equipment you do, minus any offensive weapons. Standard tracking gear, basic survival supplies, and emergency communicators only. Zephyr, a wind dancer whose gaseous form was contained within a specialized environmental suit, practically vibrated with excitement. When do we begin? Target deployment begins at 800 hours day after tomorrow. The hunt commences at 1400 hours the same day. You have until then to prepare. Vexani's display shifted to show detailed schematics of the training facility. As you can see, the environment includes urban zones, wilderness areas, underground tunnel systems, and water features. Your target could be anywhere. As the professor continued his explanation, Sarah finally looked up from her notes. Her eyes swept across the room, meeting the gaze of each student who bothered to look her way. There was something in her expression, not fear or anxiety as many expected, but a kind of calm assessment. Like she was memorizing faces, cataloging capabilities, noting who laughed loudest and who seemed most confident. Kroner caught her looking and flashed what passed for a reassuring smile among his species, though the sight of his serrated teeth had the opposite effect on most beings. "Don't worry, human. I'll try to make your capture quick and painless." Sarah simply nodded once and returned to her notes. She wrote something at the bottom of her page, tore it off, and slipped it into her pocket. Then she gathered her simple belongings and left the classroom without a word, just as she had after every session for the past 3 months. The remaining students watched her go, then immediately began forming alliances and discussing strategies. Kroner's group gathered around his seat, their enhanced predatory instincts already engaged. The cybernetic contingent, 3 students whose species had replaced most of their organic components with advanced technology, huddled around a portable hollow projector, analyzing sensor capabilities and tracking algorithms. "She won't last 6 hours, predicted Nextal, whose cybernetic enhancements included military-grade tracking systems. "My sensors can detect human biochemistry from 3 kilometers away. Once I lock onto her scent trail, it's over." "Assuming she stays on the ground," added Skyweaver, whose species could fly. "From the air, the entire facility is visible. She'll have nowhere to hide." The speculation continued for nearly an hour after class ended, with students calculating odds and making friendly wagers. The consensus was unanimous. This would be the shortest hunt in Academy history. Some felt sorry for the quiet human student. Others saw it as an easy victory. None of them considered that they might be underestimating their prey. 2 days later, Sarah Chen stood at the deployment point, a simple platform in the center of the training facility. Professor Vexani was there to see her off, along with a small team of Academy monitors who would observe the exercise from a safe distance. "You have your standard equipment pack," Vexani noted, indicating the modest backpack at Sarah's feet. "Emergency beacon, basic survival gear, water purification tablets, and 3 days' worth of nutrition bars. Remember, if you feel you're in genuine danger, activate the beacon immediately. This is a learning exercise, not a life-or-death situation." Sarah nodded and shouldered the pack. For the first time all semester, she spoke. "Professor." Her voice was quiet but clear, with no trace of the nervousness everyone expected. "May I ask a question?" Vexani's crystalline features shifted with surprise. Several monitors looked up from their equipment, startled to finally hear the mute student speak. "Of course," Vexani replied. "The rules state that I need to evade capture for 72 hours to pass. What happens if I capture my pursuers instead?" The question hung in the air like a puzzle that didn't quite fit. Vexani's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of deep thought among his species. "The rules don't account for that scenario," he admitted. "This exercise has never had a target who attempted to flip the situation. So there's no rule against it?" "No, but—" Vexani trailed off, clearly uncertain how to respond. "Miss Chen, I feel obligated to point out that you'll be facing 23 of the Academy's top students. Many of them are enhanced predators or possess technological advantages that— I understand, Sarah interrupted gently. I was just curious about the parameters. She checked the time display on her wrist communicator. My 6 hours begin now? Yes. At 1400 hours, your classmates will be released to begin tracking you. Until then, the facility is yours alone. Sarah nodded once more, then did something that would puzzle the monitors for hours afterward. She sat down on the platform, pulled out her paper notebook, and began writing. Not moving, not running, not seeking immediate shelter, just writing, as if she had all the time in the world. Miss Chen, one of the monitors called out after 10 minutes had passed. You might want to use your head start to put some distance between yourself and this location. Sarah looked up from her writing and smiled. It was the first time any of them had seen her smile, and there was something unsettling about it. Not malicious, but predatory in a way that seemed completely at odds with her quiet demeanor. I will, she said simply, when I'm ready. She returned to her writing, leaving the monitors to exchange confused glances. This wasn't how prey was supposed to behave. Every academy simulation, every training exercise, every theoretical model assumed that the hunted would immediately seek to put as much distance as possible between themselves and their pursuers. Yet here was Sarah Chen, calmly making notes as her precious head ticked away. Another hour passed, then another. By the time Sarah finally stood and shouldered her pack, she had used up half of her head start and hadn't moved more than 50 meters from the deployment point. The monitors watched through their scopes as she walked, not ran, walked, toward the tree line at a casual pace. Should we warn the hunting teams? One monitor asked. She's not even trying to hide her trail. No, Vexani decided after a moment's consideration. The parameters of the exercise remain unchanged. If Miss Chen chooses to handicap herself, that's her decision. But as they watched the small human figure disappear into the forest, several monitors couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something important. There had been something in her smile, something in her calm confidence that suggested she knew something they didn't. At exactly 1400 hours, 23 of the galaxy's most promising bounty hunters were released into the training facility. They spread out in predetermined patterns, utilizing every advantage their species and technology could provide. Kroner and his team moved like the apex predators they were, following scent trails and searching for signs of passage. The cybernetic group deployed sensor drones and began systematic sweeps of the facility's electronic signature database. Skyweaver took to the air immediately, using his species' natural flight capabilities to survey the terrain from above. Whisper in the Void began phase-shifting through solid matter, checking hiding spots that conventional searchers might miss. The academic consensus was clear. Within 6 hours, Sarah Chen would be found and apprehended, and this exercise would be remembered as a lesson in the importance of knowing one's limitations. What none of them realized was that their quarry had spent the past 3 months studying them far more carefully than they had studied her. Every class, every casual conversation, every boast about enhanced abilities or specialized equipment, Sarah had cataloged it all in her seemingly innocent notebook. Now, as her former classmates began their hunt with confidence bordering on arrogance, Sarah Chen was putting that information to use. The quiet student who never spoke in class was about to teach the galaxy's future bounty hunters a lesson they would never forget. The hunt was on. But the question of who was truly the predator and who was the prey was about to become very interesting indeed. Deep in the facility's forested zone, Sarah Chen knelt beside a stream and began her preparations. She worked with the quiet efficiency of someone who had done this before, though none of her classmates could have imagined where a human might have gained such experience. As she assembled her first trap from materials found in the forest, she allowed herself a small smile. They thought they were hunting her. Soon, they would learn how wrong they were. The first sign that something was wrong came 3 hours into the hunt. Nextal, the cybernetically enhanced tracker whose sensors could detect human biochemistry from 3 kilometers away, found himself staring at his display in confusion. His military-grade tracking systems were picking up Sarah's scent trail, but it was wrong. The chemical signature was too strong, too scattered, leading in multiple directions at once. "Impossible," he muttered, his augmented vocal cords producing the words in perfectly modulated tones. "Humans don't shed pheromones like this. The pattern suggests she's been in 12 different locations simultaneously." His partner Zix, whose species possessed natural electromagnetic sensing abilities, was experiencing similar confusion. "I'm detecting her bioelectric field signature throughout the forest. Either she's learned to teleport or what? Or she's manipulating our sensors somehow." Nextal's pride as a military-grade tracking specialist wouldn't allow him to consider that possibility. "She's human. They barely understand basic technology, let alone advanced countermeasures. Keep scanning." Neither of them noticed the small device attached to the underside of a fallen log nearby, broadcasting a carefully calibrated mix of human pheromones and electromagnetic signatures. Sarah had built it from components in her standard equipment pack during her first hour in the forest, then planted it along with 11 others at strategic points throughout their likely search routes. While Nextal and Zix wandered in circles chasing false signals, Sarah was methodically working her way through the facility's underground tunnel system. She moved with the fluid grace of someone who understood that in a hunt, the winner wasn't always the fastest or strongest, but the one who best understood the terrain and their opponents. Above ground, Kroner's predator team was having their own problems. The massive Thracian had been following what he was certain was Sarah's scent trail for 2 hours, only to discover it led to a grove where her scent signature suddenly exploded in intensity before vanishing entirely. "She was here," Kroner growled, his enhanced senses detecting the lingering traces of human biochemistry. "But the scent is too strong, like she dumped her entire body's worth of pheromones in one spot." His teammate, Razor Claw, a feline species known for their hunting prowess, padded carefully around the grove. "Look at the ground." Kroner examined the area more carefully. The soil showed clear signs of disturbance, but not from running or hiding. Someone had systematically gathered specific plants, crushed them, and mixed them with what appeared to be shredded fabric. The result was a pheromone bomb that overwhelmed their enhanced senses with human scent markers. "Clever," Razorclaw admitted grudgingly. "She's using our advantages against us." "Impossible. She's just a human. They don't have the knowledge to—" Kroner's words were cut off by a soft thud from somewhere above them. Both predators immediately looked up, scanning the canopy for threats. They found nothing, but a new sound reached their ears, a barely audible whirring like tiny machinery in motion. "What was that?" Before either could answer, thin nets dropped from the trees above, weighted perfectly to entangle their limbs. But these weren't ordinary nets. Sarah had woven them from salvaged materials and programmed them with simple motion sensors. The moment Kroner and Razorclaw tried to tear free, the nets contracted, binding them tighter. "Impossible!" Kroner roared, his claws shredding through the net material. "She can't have made these from standard equipment!" But even as he broke free, he had to admit the trap was elegantly designed. A human with basic survival gear had somehow created motion-responsive binding nets and deployed them with precision timing. It should have been beyond the capabilities of her species. What Kroner didn't know was that Sarah had spent her head start time analyzing the forest canopy, calculating sight lines and movement patterns based on her 3 months of observing her classmates' behavior. She knew Kroner always looked up when surprised. She knew Razor Claw instinctively moved left when threatened. She had designed her trap around their predictable responses. From her position in the tunnel system, Sarah monitored her handiwork through a series of mirrors and reflective surfaces she had positioned throughout the forest. Her notebook was open beside her, filled with detailed observations about each of her pursuers' capabilities, weaknesses, and behavioral patterns. Kroner and Razor Claw freed themselves after 10 minutes of struggling, but the delay had cost them valuable time and, more importantly, confidence. The prey they expected to capture within hours was proving far more elusive and resourceful than any human should be. Meanwhile, Skyweaver circled overhead, using his natural flight capabilities to survey the terrain from above. His species had perfect aerial vision and could spot movement from incredible distances. Finding one human in a 1,000-square-kilometer facility should have been trivial. But after 4 hours of searching, he had found nothing. No movement, no heat signatures, no signs of human passage. It was as if Sarah Chen had simply vanished from the facility entirely. What Skyweaver couldn't see was that Sarah was traveling exclusively through the underground tunnel network, emerging only briefly at carefully chosen locations to plant false trails and deploy more sensor decoys. Her movement pattern was based on detailed maps of the facility she had memorized during her first week of classes, cross-referenced with her observations of her classmates' search strategies. The tunnels were marked as maintenance access on official facility plans, but Sarah had spent her lunch breaks exploring them, discovering they connected nearly every major structure in the training area. While her classmates searched the obvious hiding places, she moved unseen through a network they didn't even know existed. By the 6-hour mark, the point when everyone expected Sarah to be captured, the hunting teams were growing frustrated. Whisper in the Void had phase-shifted through hundreds of potential hiding spots without finding any trace of human presence. The cybernetic team's sensor sweeps had produced nothing but false positives from Sarah's decoy devices. Even Blazix, whose plasma-based form could detect heat signatures through solid matter, was coming up empty. "Something's not right," Nextal reported over the communication channel all teams shared. "My sensors are detecting human signatures in 17 different locations, but they're all too strong and too stationary. She's spoofing our equipment somehow." "That's impossible," Kroner growled back. "Humans don't have the technology or knowledge to defeat military-grade sensors." "Then explain how she's doing it." The communication channel fell silent as none of them could provide an answer. The quiet human who never spoke in class was making some of the galaxy's most advanced students look like amateurs. Dr. Vexani and his monitoring team were equally baffled. Their long-range sensors showed the hunting teams spread throughout the facility, moving in increasingly erratic patterns as they chased false leads and second-guessed their own capabilities. But of Sarah Chen, they could find no trace. "Could she have activated her emergency beacon and been extracted without us knowing?" one monitor suggested. "Negative. All emergency frequencies are monitored. She's still in the facility somewhere." "But where? We've had eyes on the facility for 8 hours. She should be visible from our orbital platform." Vexani studied the tracking displays with growing concern. In 30 years of conducting these exercises, he had never seen a target evade detection for this long. Most students were captured within the first 4 hours. A few exceptional individuals had lasted 12. But Sarah was approaching hour 9 with no sign of being found. More troubling were the reports coming in from the hunting teams. Sophisticated traps, sensor spoofing, behavioral prediction. These were advanced skills that took years to master. Where had a human student acquired such knowledge? The answer came at hour 10, in a way none of them expected. Nextal and Zix had finally overcome their technological confusion and begun searching the old-fashioned way, using visual inspection instead of relying on their sensors. They were methodically checking the maintenance areas when Zix spotted something unusual. "There," he said, pointing to a ventilation grate that was slightly askew. That's been moved recently. They opened the grate to reveal a tunnel entrance, just wide enough for a human to crawl through. Inside, they found clear evidence of recent passage, scuff marks, disturbed dust, and most importantly, a single sheet of paper. Nextal carefully extracted the paper and read it aloud. Lesson 1. Never assume your prey is helpless just because they remain silent. The most dangerous hunters are often the ones who watch, listen, and learn before they act. SC. She left us a note. Zix couldn't hide his disbelief. She's taunting us? Before Nextal could respond, they heard a soft click from somewhere behind them. Both spun around to find the tunnel entrance, sealed by a heavy metal grate that hadn't been there moments before. The locking mechanism was on the outside, controlled by what appeared to be a simple timer device. We're trapped, Zix realized, testing the grate and finding it solid. She herded us into her own trap. Nextal activated his communicator to call for help, only to discover that the tunnel walls were lined with signal-dampening material. They were cut off from the other teams, stuck in a maintenance tunnel, outsmarted by the human they had dismissed as helpless. As they worked to free themselves, similar reports began coming in from other teams. Kroner and Razorclaw found themselves locked in a storage facility after following what seemed like a clear trail. Skyweaver discovered his flight patterns had been predicted so accurately that Sarah had laid aerial snares along his most likely routes. Whisper in the Void triggered a containment field that temporarily disrupted his phase-shifting abilities. One by one, the galaxy's most promising bounty hunter students were being outmaneuvered by their supposedly helpless prey. Each trap was elegant, non-violent, and demonstrated an understanding of their abilities that should have been impossible for someone who never spoke in class. But the most shocking discovery came when Blazix, pursuing what he thought was Sarah's heat signature in the facility's old reactor building, found himself face-to-face with the human herself. She was sitting calmly on a maintenance platform, her notebook open in her lap, looking for all the world like she was studying for an exam, rather than being hunted by 23 enhanced individuals. "Hello, Blazix," she said quietly. "I've been waiting for you." The plasma-based entity flickered with surprise. You knew I was coming? You always check heat sources from bottom to top, and you move in a spiral pattern when you're uncertain. I've been watching you do it in simulation exercises all semester. Sarah closed her notebook and stood up. I calculated you'd reach this location at approximately this time, give or take 10 minutes. Blazix's energy form pulsed with a mixture of confusion and grudging respect. How? Because I paid attention. While everyone else was showing off their natural abilities, I was learning about them. Sarah gestured to her notebook. Did you know that you unconsciously dim your luminosity by 12% when you're concentrating? Or that your plasma field creates a specific electromagnetic signature that's detectable through most shielding materials? That's impossible. Humans don't have the sensory equipment to detect such subtle changes. Sarah smiled, that same unsettling smile the monitors had seen 12 hours earlier. Humans don't need enhanced senses to be effective hunters, Blazix. We have something better. What's that? Persistence, and pattern recognition, and the willingness to study our prey until we understand them better than they understand themselves. Sarah picked up her equipment pack. Your friends are all temporarily detained, by the way. Nothing harmful, just enough to keep them busy while we have this conversation. Blazix's plasma form fluctuated wildly. You've been hunting us? While we thought we were hunting you? The best defense is often a good offense. But don't worry, everyone will be free within the hour. I just wanted to make a point. Sarah started walking toward the platform's exit. Would you like to know why I never spoke in class? Yes? Because I was listening, learning, understanding that the most dangerous predator in any ecosystem isn't always the biggest or fastest or strongest. Sometimes it's the one that understands the system better than anyone else. Sarah paused at the platform's edge. Tell me, Blazix, when you report back to Professor Vexani, what do you think he'll be most interested in? The fact that a human managed to evade capture for 12 hours, or the fact that she systematically neutralized 23 enhanced opponents using nothing but basic equipment and careful observation? With that, Sarah activated a prepared zip line and disappeared into the facility's infrastructure, leaving Blazix alone with a revelation that would shake the foundations of everything the Galactic Academy thought it knew about human potential. The hunt was far from over, but the roles had definitively reversed. The prey had become the predator, and the galaxy's future bounty hunters were learning a lesson that no classroom could teach. Never underestimate a species just because they seem quiet and unremarkable. Sometimes the most dangerous hunters are the ones you never see coming. By hour 18 of the exercise, the monitoring station had become the most crowded room in the Galactic Academy. Word had spread throughout the facility that something unprecedented was happening in the bounty hunting practical exam. Faculty members, advanced students, and even visiting dignitaries had gathered to watch as 23 of the galaxy's most promising hunters were systematically outmaneuvered by a single human. Professor Vexani stood before the main display, his forearms crossed as he tried to make sense of what he was witnessing. The tracking system showed his students spread across the facility, but instead of conducting a coordinated hunt, they were engaged in what appeared to be a complex game of three-dimensional chess with an opponent who always seemed to be several moves ahead. "Status report," he demanded. Monitor Captain Thexelar, a veteran of the Academy's security forces, consulted his displays with barely concealed amazement. 17 teams have been temporarily incapacitated or delayed by various nonviolent means. 6 teams are currently pursuing what they believe to be the target, but sensor analysis suggests they're following false trails. The remaining teams are... He paused, clearly struggling with his words. The remaining teams appear to be fleeing. Fleeing? Vexani's crystalline features shifted to display shock. From a human? Yes, sir. Specifically, they're retreating from what Kroner's team describes as impossible tracking behavior. According to their reports, the target isn't just evading capture, she's actively hunting them. The concept was so foreign to everything the Academy taught about predator-prey dynamics that several faculty members openly scoffed. But the evidence was undeniable. The tracking displays showed Sarah Chen's pursuers moving in retreat patterns, taking defensive positions, and in some cases, actively requesting extraction from the exercise. "Bring up the individual team reports," Vexani ordered. The first report came from Zix, whose electromagnetic sensing abilities had finally freed him and Enextal from their tunnel prison. His voice carried a mixture of professional respect and genuine unease. "Target demonstrates advanced knowledge of electronic countermeasures and behavioral psychology. She's been tracking our movements for hours, predicting our responses with 97% accuracy. Request permission to escalate to full combat protocols." "Denied," Vexani responded immediately. "This is a training exercise, not a military engagement." The next report came from Skyweaver, whose aerial advantage had been completely neutralized. "Target has somehow mapped my flight patterns from the past 3 months of training exercises. She's placed obstacles and snares along every logical air route. I can't maintain altitude without triggering more traps. She's grounded me." Razorclaw's report was even more disturbing. "Sir, I've been hunting professionally for 15 years across 12 different worlds. I have never encountered a target who understands predator behavior this thoroughly. She's not just avoiding us, she's hurting us. We're being manipulated, and most of my team doesn't even realize it." The reports continued, each more unsettling than the last. The galaxy's most advanced students were describing tactics and capabilities that exceeded their own, demonstrated by a human who had never shown any special abilities in the classroom. "Professor?" Monitor Captain Thexelar said quietly. "We're receiving a transmission from the target." "Sarah Chen is broadcasting?" "Yes, sir. Audio only, directed to the monitoring station." Vexani nodded for the transmission to be put through. Sarah's calm, clear voice filled the room. "Professor Vexani, this is Sarah Chen. I believe it's time we discussed the real purpose of this exercise." "Miss Chen, are you requesting extraction?" "No, sir. I'm requesting a meeting, Central Courtyard, in 1 hour. I have something to show you that I think will change how the Academy views human potential." There was a pause before Sarah continued. "Oh, and Professor, you might want to recall the hunting teams. They've learned everything they're going to learn from this exercise. What happens next? Well, let's just say it moves beyond their current skill level." The transmission ended, leaving the monitoring room in stunned silence. An hour later, Professor Vexani stood in the facility's central courtyard, accompanied by his monitoring team and several faculty members. They had indeed recalled the hunting teams, all of whom had seemed relieved to return to base. The students now watched from a safe distance, many sporting minor injuries and bruised egos from their encounters with traps and misdirections. Sarah Chen emerged from the facility's main building, walking calmly across the courtyard as if she hadn't just spent 24 hours evading capture by some of the galaxy's most capable individuals. Her notebook was tucked under one arm, and she carried herself with a confidence that none of them had ever seen from her before. "Thank you for coming, Professor," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the courtyard. "Before we discuss the results of this exercise, I think it's time you knew who I really am." Vexani's 4 eyes focused intently on her. "I'm listening." Sarah opened her notebook and read from the first page. Sarah Chen, formerly Operative SC-7 of the Terran Special Operations Division, Tracking and Recovery Specialist, veteran of 37 successful extractions across hostile territory, current record holder for longest successful evasion of pursuit, 18 days, 4 hours, 16 minutes. The courtyard fell absolutely silent. Even the wind seemed to pause as the implications of her words sank in. "You're military," Vexani said. "It wasn't a question. Was retired 6 months ago after my last mission. Came here because I wanted to understand how the galaxy's other species approach tracking and hunting. What I found was educational." Sarah closed her notebook and looked around at the assembled students. "Your species have remarkable natural abilities, enhanced senses, technological integration, physical capabilities that humans can't match. But you've made a critical error in your thinking, which is, you assume that superior physical capabilities automatically translate to superior hunting skills. You've become dependent on your advantages and forgotten the fundamentals of what makes an effective predator." Professor Vexani stepped closer. "And what are those fundamentals?" Sarah's expression shifted, and for the first time, everyone present could see the predator that had been hiding behind the quiet student facade. Patience, observation, adaptation, and most importantly, the ability to think like your prey while making sure they never think like you. She gestured to the hunting teams. "Every one of your students has abilities that exceed mine in specific areas. Kronor is stronger and faster. Nextal has sensors I can't match. Skyweaver can fly. But none of them spent 3 months learning how I think, while I spent 3 months learning how they think." The notebook, Vexani realized. "You weren't taking class notes. I was taking behavioral notes, hunting patterns, stress responses, decision trees, preference hierarchies. By the time this exercise began, I knew each of them better than they knew themselves." Sarah pulled out a data pad and activated a holographic display. "Would you like to see the predictive models I built?" The display showed detailed psychological profiles of each student, complete with probability matrices for their likely actions under various scenarios. The accuracy was stunning. Nearly every decision the hunting teams had made during the exercise was predicted within the model's parameters. "This is impossible," Kroner growled from where he stood with the other students. "No species can analyze behavior with this level of precision." Sarah turned to face him directly. "You're wrong, Kroner. One species can. One species had to, because we didn't have the luxury of being the strongest or fastest or most technologically advanced. We had to be smarter, more adaptable, better at reading patterns and predicting behavior. We had to become the ultimate predators, not despite our limitations, but because of them." The silence that followed was broken by Dr. Yithara, the Academy's head of xenopsychology. "Are you saying that humans develop superior hunting capabilities as a survival mechanism?" "I'm saying that humans developed as persistence hunters on a world that tried to kill us every day for millions of years. We learned to track prey across continents, to predict their behavior, to outlast them through sheer determination and superior tactical thinking. Every human carries those instincts, whether they realize it or not." Sarah activated another display on her data pad. "During this exercise, I didn't just evade capture. I systematically gathered intelligence on each team, analyzed their capabilities and weaknesses, and developed counter-strategies that neutralized their advantages. The traps, the false trails, the sensor spoofing, all of it was improvised from basic equipment using principles any human tracker would understand." The implications were staggering. If one human, using only basic equipment and 3 months of observation, could outmaneuver 23 enhanced opponents, what did that say about humanity's potential in the broader galaxy? "Why?" Vexani asked. "Why reveal this now? You could have completed the exercise, passed your exam, and none of us would have been the wiser about your true capabilities." Sarah's smile held no warmth. "Because the galaxy is about to learn what humans are capable of, Professor. We're not the quiet, unremarkable species you think we are. We're the species that survived on a death world by becoming better hunters than anything that tried to hunt us. And we're just getting started." She gestured to the assembled students. "Your pupils have potential, but they've been trained to rely on their natural advantages. When those advantages are neutralized, they don't know how to adapt. That makes them predictable, and predictable prey is easy prey. You're suggesting that humans pose a threat to galactic security?" The question came from Commander Zarthek, a military advisor who had been observing the exercise. "I'm suggesting that humans pose a threat to anyone who underestimates us. Your militaries, your security forces, your criminal enterprises, they're all designed around the assumption that superior technology and enhanced biology equal tactical superiority. That assumption is wrong." Sarah picked up her equipment pack. "The exercise isn't over yet. I still have 48 hours to avoid capture, but I think we can all agree that the educational value has been achieved. Your students have learned that there's more to hunting than natural ability. And you've learned that humans are far more dangerous than you realized." She started walking toward the facility's exit, then paused and looked back. "Oh, and Professor, you might want to revise your curriculum. If one retired human operative can make your best students look like amateurs, imagine what an active team could do." With that, Sarah Chen walked out of the Galactic Academy's training facility, leaving behind 23 shaken students, a dozen confused faculty members, and a fundamental shift in how the galaxy viewed human potential. Professor Vexani watched her go, his crystalline features cycling through colors that indicated deep thought and growing concern. "Monitor, Captain," he said quietly. "Initiate a priority communication with Galactic Defense Command." "Sir?" "Inform them that our assessment of human capabilities may need significant revision, and suggest that they might want to consider recruiting human operatives for specialized missions." "What kind of missions, sir?" Vexani's 4 eyes tracked Sarah's departing figure until she disappeared from sight. The kind where you need to catch someone who doesn't want to be caught. It appears we've been teaching the wrong species how to hunt. In the weeks that followed, the story of the exercise spread throughout the Galactic Academy and beyond. The quiet human who never spoke in class became legendary, not as a failure or an underachiever, but as the individual who single-handedly revolutionized the galaxy's understanding of predator-prey dynamics. The Academy's bounty hunting program was completely overhauled to include human tactical concepts and behavioral analysis techniques. Several galactic military organizations quietly began recruiting human advisors for their special operations divisions. And across known space, a new phrase entered the common vocabulary. Never underestimate the mute one in the back row, because sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones who understand that true hunting isn't about strength or speed or technology. It's about patience, intelligence, and the absolute certainty that no prey, no matter how advanced or enhanced, can escape forever from something that truly understands how to hunt. Humanity had announced its presence in the galaxy not with force or technology, but with something far more fundamental. The knowledge that in the end, the best hunter isn't the one with the sharpest claws or the keenest sensors. It's the one who never stops thinking, never stops learning, and never, ever gives up the chase. The mute one in the back row had spoken, and the galaxy would never be the same.